You've been searching for the best way to generate passive income in your life and heard that real estate is a great way to do it. But you're tired of all the so-called gurus who are all talk and no substance. Get ready to celebrate because Kevin Buck has spent 14 years successfully making it happen. This is the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Now, here's Kevin Buck.
Hey guys, Kevin Bupp here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast, where our mission is to help you build and maintain massive amounts of cash flow through income-producing real estate investments. And our guest for this week's show is real estate investment expert Jason Yarusi. Jason is an active investor and business owner who's involved in a multitude of real estate-related businesses, including being the owner of a 94-unit apartment complex, actively flipping 16-plus homes per year, and also running his family's building and house moving business. And in today's show, we're going to go behind the scenes with Jason and explore his background as it pertains to real estate investing. And if all goes as planned, have you guys walk away from the show with actionable advice that you can begin applying to your business immediately. Before we get on the show with Jason, I'd like to briefly run through a few updates for you guys. First and foremost, we've got some incredible things happening here at Sunrise Capital Investors, which is our mobile home investment company. And we're in like super growth mode, and we just set some really large, lofty goals for ourselves. It's a 5-year goal we just set about a month and a half ago. And our goal is to basically make it to the top 20 of operators in terms of our size of our holdings. And that would be 10,000 mobile home lots under ownership and management. So next 5 years, we're going to take our portfolio from about 1,000 today to 10,000 in 5 years. And the reason why I'm telling you guys this is because we need help. And so what we've done is we're just putting the finishing touches on developing an apprenticeship program. We're looking to bring in those that have an interest in our business, have an interest in working side by side with our team to learn the ins and outs of the mobile home park investment business, but also be a part of our family and grow with us as we work towards that 10,000 mobile home park lot goal. Okay. So guys, if you have an interest in learning about the apprenticeship program, stay tuned. We're going to actually be launching it next week, okay? So next week, we're going to be launching this apprenticeship program, and you'll be able to go to our website, sunrisecapitalinvestors.com, and I'm going to give you an actual direct URL to that page, and it'll give you all the details on what we're looking for and how to apply for it. Next up, if you haven't heard already, my business partner, Charles D. Hart, and myself are releasing a book on mobile home park investing. It should be done here in the next month or two. And for those that tune into the show that are loyal listeners, we are going to be giving you a copy for free. And so all you need to do in order to get this free copy, and this is before it goes for sale on Amazon, because it will go up on Amazon at some point, okay? So to get on this waiting list to get your free copy, text the word Kevin, my name, Kevin, to 41411. Again, text Kevin to 41411. We'll put you on that VIP list and get you a copy as soon as that book is finished. Also, guys, if you're someone that's out there, if you're someone that's looking for passive income, like we're active in our business. I mean, we're in the daily grind, day in and day out. But if you're someone that's looking for more of a passive type of role, we've got some incredible opportunities, partnership opportunities to work with us at Sunrise Capital Investors. So if you're someone that's kind of sitting on the sidelines, you got some capital looking to put it to work into an incredible asset with an incredible team, you might want to check out the partnership opportunity that we have here at Sunrise Capital Investors. You can go to our website, sunrisecapitalinvestors.com, or you can just give us a call, 888-260-9455. And you can download our entire investment prospectus on our website, review our PPM materials, and learn about our investment opportunity. Again, you have to be accredited to be a part of it, but if you're looking for a great passive income stream, this might be the one for you. So go check it out, sunrisecapitalinvestors.com. And then lastly, guys, if you happen to be in the Tampa Bay area, I'd love to meet you. I love meeting others that share the same passion as I do for real estate. And you guys have heard me mention this probably pretty much every episode for the past 3 years, that if you're in town, if you're here visiting, I'm in Clearwater, which is about 20 minutes away from Tampa. And so if you're here visiting for work, pleasure, whatever it might be, and you're passing through town, let me know. Give me a heads up that you're coming through, and I'd love to schedule a time to grab a coffee or a lunch or beer or whatever you have time for while you're here visiting. And you can just shoot me an email to my personal email address, which is kevin@kevinbupp.com. Just let me know when you're coming, and we'll try to coordinate during your visit here. So, guys, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jason Yarusi to the show. Jason, how you doing, my friend?
Hey, Kevin. I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, bud. I'm looking to dig into your business a little bit here today and learn about you got fingers in a million different pots, and so I want to talk about some of those pots and find out what goes on in the life of Jason Yarusi. Before we do that, maybe just kind of give us some of those a little bit of the background leading up to you getting involved in the real estate business and how you were introduced to this niche.
Sure. Yeah, you said real estate expert, and I'll say I appreciate that, but far from it. I'll say expert at trying very hard and hopefully learning to try very smart and be an expert at that. So I'm still working on that day in and day out. And for this, we come from 5 generations of construction, my family. We pivoted at one point about a little over 40 years ago and started moving into heavy construction and primarily moving structures and lifting structures. My father and really just back to my grandfather were finding a lot of avenues where homeowners, contractors were being stuck with projects, and the projects they couldn't take them to the next step because of foundation issues, or they were having settlement in houses, or even a house was being built in the wrong setbacks. And they just took this as an opportunity where it was so easy to enter the market if you wanted to be a framer or a mason, but it became so technical and so advanced if someone wanted to get into the building moving process. So they took it, ran with it, and fast forward now to about 2011, 2012, and 2013, business really took a turn when Hurricane Sandy happened. And there was a lot of homeowners who were in need to have to lift their houses to be able to meet FEMA requirements, to lower their flood insurances, to ultimately to just get themselves back home. So we went from doing a couple dozen house lifts and building moves a year to doing about 1,600 since the storm. It's probably about 1,650 now.
Wow. Since
the storm, and it's been quite aggressive. So with that, we've always had the idea that we wanted to diversify and to move into real estate and to more real estate related projects, just because the house living, while it is gratifying and we're able to tackle on these large projects, they're very intensive, they're very labor intensive, they're very overhead intensive, and there's no repetitive process from this. Basically, we'll lift the house and set it on a new foundation, and that's the last time that we work with that homeowner, because generally no one's lived in their house for a second time, for lack of a better sentence there. So we wanted to find ways that we could create cash flow, and we could create things that could pay back, that we wouldn't have to put so much energy into in such a process. So had sat down with my wife, and we were trying to take a direction from there. And this was coming off where we have a restaurant, we have a brewery in New York City. We have a number of different projects going, and we wanted to really push our attention now that we moved into New Jersey, just into projects that were going to fit in line with that. So my wife got a real estate license with Keller Williams about 4 years back. We started looking for properties. A lot of this was coming on the MLS, and we started finding properties that worked where we could use our house lifting to our advantage. So what we would do is we would take a house and we would lift the house, make it FEMA compliant, lower the flood insurance down from $5,000, sometimes $10,000 a year just for your flood insurance down to a reasonable $500 a year. And then on top of that, add square footage to the home. Where New Jersey markets, they allow us a lot, right? A lot of the markets where we can add square footage and build less than it will cost, or it will allow for us to resell that same square footage. So we were doing this in a lot of homes where maybe we were adding a second level, and we were doing it the opposite way of popping a top, where we would lift the story up and build down from there and basically flip-flop the footprint. And that's actually allowed us to push more into real estate in a lot of different ways, from one. And then as this process developed, we've learned that these projects, while they're great and we're able to basically use all of our advantages, they also now are very labor intensive. So we've been looking to now push our business into quicker rehabs and quicker timelines, where the prior projects can take 6 to 9 months with all the red tape, with now meeting the FEMA requirements, planning, utility disconnects, and utility reconnects, and then eventually selling the home, where into properties that really didn't have such the heavy rehab. And that's been our focus right now as we push into the wholesale model. And in the meantime, we've now taken a side business of looking at the larger multifamily out of state, and that leads us back to the 94 unit that we just recently closed on about 4 months ago.
Gosh, yeah. So you have a lot going on. I mean, just from 1,600 projects since Hurricane Sandy to buying a 94-unit building. I mean, there's just, and I'm sitting here thinking of all the moving pieces of your house moving business. Like sitting and breaking down like standard operating procedures for any businesses is just daunting and time consuming. And once you really dig into it, like there's so many more moving pieces than what you would ever even anticipate, even the most simplest businesses. But then you take a complicated business like the house moving business. I can't even imagine how you guys were able to scale. Like what systems and processes you had to put in place to scale to take on that many projects. Like that's overwhelming for me to even think about.
I would tell you it's been the most difficult thing, and I'm not going to lie. It's not all roses. It's been very difficult because it is very overhead savvy. So we need to buy a lot of steel and oak cribbing, and that's one of the repetitive process that we use in all of our businesses. But our business, it's not that every house is always the same. So just for context, this week alone, my brother is moving a wood frame house. He's also moving a stucco garage, and then he's lifting a stone house all in the same week. And so 3 completely different projects that need completely different layouts, that need completely different attention and completely different techniques to accomplish. So it's hard for us to replicate, and I've done better in some parts and worse in others. I've done better in being able to find people who of course can take on all the call volume, handle all the office, handle all the paperwork. But one of the most difficult points is to find the skilled labor, in a sense, to be able to take some of the roles away from some of our family members, which is a good and a bad thing. So we've given our responsibility with sometimes or most of the time people's largest possession, their house. And so we want to make sure we can do everything right and have little room for error, because a little error can be a massive error, and we want to make sure that we're always the point there. So to say that I've tried to systemize it, and I've done well in certain points, but I have a lot still that I'm working on to make that a better system for everyone.
Aren't we always, every day in our business? We're always working
Correct.
to make it better, right? So there's never that day that you get to, you're like, God, this is perfection. Everything's working like a perfectly oiled machine. Like there's always something else. There's always something else. So
that's right. That's like my father. That's what he always says to me. So I'm like, Dad, we have this process. It's perfect. It works here. He goes, well, I have this idea. I can make it better. I was like, well, the homeowners have already signed on this process. So if we do this, I now have to take this, go back, go through building, go through permitting, all this, but they're going to like it better. Okay, Dad, if you want to do this, just so you know the timeline that's going to come around. And he's usually right. But usually the timeline gets thrown into a whole loop because father generally knows best on these projects.
That's an interesting generation, our parents, and I don't know how old you are, Jace. I'm assuming you're probably in your late 20s, 30s, or maybe in early 40s. Just from the little bit I do know about you.
Late 30s. Yep.
Okay, so about the same age, and so our fathers, that generation, it's very unique. I mean, they're very much more perfectionist than our generation for whatever reason. I'm not sure why, and I like that. Like that's very respectful that they take such. They take such like what's the word I'm looking for, respect to their craft. I mean, like the craft and the skill that they possess. They put every ounce of energy that they have into making it as good as it could possibly be. I think that's a generational thing. Not saying that you and I don't do the same, but it's very common with our parents' generation.
It's one of the most difficult proponents of our business between my father and my brother and myself, because we see a shortcut. My dad has his route going, and I understand it 100%. And he does it perfectly, but sometimes I'm like, Dad, put the shovel down. Right. Like, put it down. It's like, we got all these guys here watching you do this, and I understand you'll probably do it best, but put it down. Let all these guys go. So but it is fun. And that's what makes family businesses what they are.
So basically what you have a business, but it's project after project, right? As soon as one project's done,
correct,
you're on to the next. So it's essentially, let's call it a job. It is, because if you stop working, that business doesn't continue on its own. It does. You and your family can't go sit on a beach somewhere for an entire year if you so chose to, and have that business stay
correct,
intact. And that's 4 years ago or so, you said that you really started looking for other sources of revenue that wasn't just related to either house flipping or this, the house moving business. And that's when you started considering multifamily properties. And you just recently closed on a 94 unit property. In fact, that was only in the last couple of months, I believe, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And honestly, it took me a big mindset, because it really was about 2 years ago, 2.5, let's say, where we started really learning more about rentals. And maybe I'm a little more risk averse, but I ended up buying smaller rentals, duplexes and triplexes out of state, over in Indianapolis. I had some in Alabama. And I had a process that I was probably about 60% good at, and maybe I got a little lucky, and they all worked out great. So, okay, fine. So that step happened and allowed me to at least open my mindset, and then I started seeing checks in the mail. And I was like, well, wow, this is nice. So this is nice for a property that I have someone else managing, that I have someone else taking care of, that I have other tenants there basically paying me rent. And it was a great feeling to start seeing that come through, where you had just a minimal amount of attention to them once they were now stabilized and in the process, and they were now basically giving me back income. Mm-hmm. And I said, man, this is something else. Well, what if I could do this on a much larger scale? Because it's still, like with a two-family, you're paying more for management, you're paying more for attention. If you have one vacant unit, that's 50% of your property. So there was still that point where it was like, okay, this is good, but how can I make this better? So I started reading and researching a lot about larger apartment complexes. And at the same time, I had a high school friend that we grew up with. We were, played football, played all sports together. And I think we were sitting on his back deck, drinking some beers and just talking. And he's been in commercial real estate for about 14 years now, since he had gotten out of the Marines. And I was just telling him what I was doing. He was like, dude, I've been thinking about this constantly. Let's do this. And I was like, I'm in. So we started putting together a program with that and with our family to be able to package and find properties out of state. And what we did is I ended up selling off the smaller properties, because I with all this, one of the most difficult things for me is always focus, because with so many different things going, sometimes the strong focus needs to be on where you want to go, and a lot of the emergencies that are not necessarily where you want to go will take your attention off of it. Mm-hmm. So we put a heavy focus into finding a market that had population growth, finding a market that had jobs, and not only did it have jobs, but it had heavy job diversity. And so no employer was making up more than 20% of the job share. And lastly, I had some no in the market. And this one happened to be in Kentucky, where my sister lives, and friends who had grown up with Jersey, they had moved back to Kentucky, would be with their family about 15 or 20 years. So I'd been to Kentucky a number of times and had just seen it transform in its own way. So I was comfortable enough to just know Kentucky, and specifically Louisville. So what I did is find other people who were doing this and learn from their processes. And I started calling people in the area and looking on sites like Bigger Pockets and talking to investors in the area, and just really researching what were the submarkets that not only worked good for apartment complexes, but that were more working class areas. Mm-hmm. And then started talking to property managers who were versed in this. And one thing I would say is that whatever class you're in, if you're going to use a property manager, you want to make sure that they're right to manage your property. So we wanted to have 75 to 200 units. That was the focus of the apartment complex that we were going to go after. And it was in a B and C asset, and it was in a working class area. So we wanted to have a property manager that did not just focus on office space, or did not just focus on single family homes. We wanted someone that was completely set up to focus on this specific niche, and also carry construction in-house. And lastly, they manage enough units where if I was to find 100 or 200 unit building, it wasn't going to make a blip in the radar. So from talking to different people there, we found a property manager who, they have 5,500 units. It was about 5,000 of them, but about 5,500 units now. They have a system in place. They know the area very well, and ended up talking to them and telling them about the properties and just creating that relationship. And from them, we started meeting brokers and started meeting insurance people, and just started putting a whole team together into place. And at that, we're also just aggressively looking in the area for deals that fit our context. And it's just so happened that through a couple months of being with the property manager of a property that was coming available, and they brought it to our attention, and it had been on the market about a year plus prior and had gone off the market just for whatever reason. They weren't getting their number. And the property manager knew that this market, they really wanted to push this property. So that's where we came apart and started into the negotiations. And it was an incredible opportunity because you had an owner of, he owns about 1,000 units or so in Louisville. A lot of them are strongly single family homes. But this was his larger apartment complex, and he was up in his 90s, still alive, still doing his thing. But yeah, he was phasing out, and the kids were I call them kids, but they were like in their 50s and 60s, or like 4 of them. None of them were in the state, and none of them were in the business. So you have a dad phasing out. You have kids who really they have families. They may even have grandkids at this point, and they're doing their own life and having their own life out of state. So now they have these apartment complex and other houses, and they're like, well, what do we do here? So they had put it out in the market about a year or so prior, got a huge number from some guy, and the guy immediately put in a contract with them and came back, and I think day one, like, retrade it for like $1 million less, and that just killed the deal. No one wants to be like that. You want to give them the right number. So we went in there and offered them the number that worked for us, and we were about, at that time, we were about 1.1 million off. And they just came back at that number that they had gotten from that guy about a year ago prior, because now that number was in their head. And we just said, no, I'm sorry, this is just the numbers that worked for the property based on how it was being operated. So things went dormant for about 4 or 5 months, and my partner and I, we were still looking at a lot of properties. And we just said, you know what, we had about a little bit of room on that property where we could up or offer just conservatively wanted to meet. So we up or offer $50,000 and sent it back out to the university, to the owners. And all of a sudden we get a response that now they've cut their ask down $600,000. And we knew we had something that now we had something going on. So we put all of our focus into this property. Over the next 3 or so months, we got it down to, we ended up closing it at $2.3 million, which was about $1 million off, a little less than $1 million off, which was their original asking price. And the kicker there is the last thing to get it to the finish line is they asked that we would just pay our broker's commission. Mm-hmm. And that still put us under our strike price, or basically our max offer was 2.45. So we still beat that, and everything worked out. They were able to get rid of what they saw as a problem property, and we were able to get into a property that has a ton of upside potential. And it's been now us putting our process in place, and that brings us to where we are.
So that price per unit, man, $26,000 per unit. That sounds like a home run. I mean, I don't know what the rest of the numbers look like, but just knowing that it's in Louisville, and is it Louisville or Louisville, or what's the right way to say it?
If you're in New Jersey, you say Louisville, but if you're there, it's Louisville. So
Louisville.
You get corrected pretty quick if you're in Kentucky. Yep.
Yeah, you can't say Louisville. You don't say Louisville.
Exactly.
Yeah, you get smacked in the back of the
Kevin
head.
showed up first day with us and said that. I said, okay, Kevin, first thing is you're going to push us out real quick if you keep talking like that. So listen, you got to listen to these guys. So.
Okay. So talk to me about, first off, the big question I have is, why was this property considered a problem property to the owner? I mean, what was the problem with it, and what's your plan to fix it?
I would say the thing for them that stood out, and it's usually the opposite context, is they saw this as they're primarily single-family homeowners, and so that was most of their property. So they were much more comfortable with their dad doing that, and maybe that's what they were doing forever. Huh. And so for this, they saw this larger apartment complex as this one big, massive complex, and that must be the problem. It was actually 5 buildings, so they just weren't really putting much attention into it because their business model was primarily basically set for single-family homes.
Sure.
So that was the direction they were going in. So this had just been neglected, and the rents were about $75 to $100 under market, and we're actually hitting price expectations now that are even higher than that, which is great. But you had a 92% occupied property where across the street you could go to another apartment complex where there's another 600 apartments in the area, and throughout you have a 3% vacancy, and this was 8%. But across the street and everywhere else, you were paying those market rates of $100 to $75 more for the unit. So same property across the street, you're paying more, and you have more people living in them. And it just blew our mind. And then when we got there, we were able to really figure out why. And we walked into the office, and there was a nice lady, Gidget, that was her name. She was in the office, and she was watching Dog the Bounty Hunter. I'll never forget it.
Oh,
and
great.
we were like, hey, and she didn't want to have anything to do with us. And they had 4 units that were rent ready that were just sitting there. And we were like, so how do you market these? She was like, well, people just kind of come by when they come by. Well, how many people usually come by? Well, a few come by here and there. And of those, how many usually maybe do you get a qualified application from? Maybe we'll get like 1 or 20, or they were just like completely a guess game. So we realized very quickly that the problem was within, and they were having a difficult time with collections. But what made it even more interesting is that you have a lady in an office who wasn't able to collect the rent. And so now the tenants there, they had to take the rent, and they either had to mail it or they had to go 3.5 miles away to go drop off the rent at the other office that basically was the head. So there's another reason now. Now you got this, that what happened. And now, okay, that's another interesting point. So we actually now collect rent, and of course collections have gotten better. And they had a maintenance guy on staff who was living rent-free, and he had two basements there, and the basements were just filled with junk, and he just had stuff everywhere. And he was kind of managing these properties and helping out on other properties. So one of our biggest thing of getting to the finish line is that we were just having a hard time understanding the financials, because it was 5 buildings that made up the 94 units that were all basically adjacent to each other. And the 5 buildings were split over 3 LLCs. And one of the LLCs had the rent income for, it was the rent income for 4 of the buildings. The other one had rent income for 1 of the building, and the other one had the laundry income and the expenses for all the buildings.
Oh my, what a mess.
Now it was, and I don't quite understand to this day what the magical thought process was there, but that was the process. So we had a lender who worked very well with us, and they were versed in this type of project. So it wasn't like the first time they'd ever seen this, but we were getting boxes of papers and rent raises that were tracked on napkins. Like back in June, like we raised everybody's rent $20 just, in pencil. So we were digging through a lot of things trying to figure, and there was leases that, they had a lady who had been living there since like 1990, and supposedly she was paying about $250 under market, based on her lease that hadn't been renewed in all this time. So we had to go in there and figure out what she was actually paying, and just a lot of those points to actually figure out what was actually happening on this property. So we got ourselves to the point where, we understood what was happening. And now what we're doing this property and a couple other things is just all the other apartment complexes around the area, they allow pets. And it's basically a $300 non-refundable pet fee and $25 to $35 a month. Well, being that this was so-called problem child for this owner, they didn't want pets, so they were the only property that didn't allow pets. But when we did our inspection, 10 of the units already had pets. So we were like, well, this is a no-brainer. It's easy income. Where everybody else is allowing this, we'll put this into our process. So we've added that in. We let go of Gidget, and we also let go of the maintenance person. And with that, he moved all this stuff out of these 2 basements, and we're now into point of building 10 storage units in the basements, because there's we're going to test it, but based on the market, we can get $35 per month for each storage unit down there, and we have a room to build, I think, 24 more. Mm-hmm. If the model works as we expect it to. And then a lot of the other things are on the utility side. This is a master meter property. The boilers were, for 2 of the buildings have boilers, and to say they were operating at 40% efficiency is probably kind. So we're replacing each of those boilers with 82% efficient boilers. We're changing out all the toilets, the shower heads, the faucets, looking at our water bill. We'll be able to cut down to, if we put in low flush, down to about 25% is what we're expecting to be able to cut our water bill. And we will also be changing out all the windows now throughout the complex because they're going back to all the aluminum frame windows, back to the original builds in the 70s. It just so when we do put in these efficient heating systems, that all the heat's not billowing out the windows.
Right. Gotcha. Well, there's a couple points that I've taken so far from your story about this 94 unit property, and I'm going to back up a little bit because one of the very first points that I took away from your story is the importance of just networking. And as you talked about building your team and talking to different property management companies and talking to different insurance agents and brokers in that marketplace. I mean, that's how you guys found this deal. You found this deal by networking and actually talking, blabbing your mouth, right? I mean, that's how this deal came across.
Yeah, and I would make it apparent that anything I've said here, I didn't create any of this stuff. I've learned this from other people doing it longer and better than I. So I've just taken these and put which worked in this property.
But you took action.
That's really how we've done.
You took action. That's the part that's so special is that a lot of people, you're right. Like you're not the one that created this process. There's plenty of other people out there that speak about these same things, but you actually put it into action. And that's the most important part because really there's 99% of the people that just aren't going to do anything with what they listen to. In fact, those that are listening to this story right now, they're not going to necessarily take action. A few of them will, most of them won't. And those that do are the ones that are going to find the results that they're seeking. So it's just really perseverance and putting the motion in place, but keeping that motion moving forward and just being patient with the process and trusting the process as well, because the process works. Another point I want to make here is, or at least what I've taken away from your story is the importance of us. I guess sometimes it's not the best to be number one in line. Sometimes it is with a deal, but as you had mentioned, this deal was on the market before, and some uneducated buyer came along and unfortunately kind of screwed things up, more so for himself, but offered a price too high and then tried to retrade. Thing came back off the market. Sellers probably became a little bit more motivated over that next year, and you were kind of the second line, right? But if you were in the first in line, you might have gotten a little frustrated with it and maybe never came to a final deal because you ended up paying $1 million less than I think what you said it started at. So, which actually would that have been $2 million less than what that other guy had it under contract for, or was it just $1 million less?
It was just a little. He was about a little over $1 million, but that had set their mind that so this property, this guy offered me this property, so it must be worth this. And just in fact is that, and one of the things here is just because the numbers made sense to us, we were dealing with an owner who was in his 90s, so he wasn't really the point real estate. So for us, they weren't really thinking about the numbers. They were just thinking about a number, and the number being the sale price. And that's all they really cared about.
That's pretty common with these mom and pops.
Correct.
Yeah. So, and the other interesting thing that I took from your story there is the fact that you said they owned about 1,000 properties, right? And most of them were single-family homes. The fact that they saw this as the problem, whereas if you can put together a management system to efficiently manage 900 single-family homes, that apartment complex should have been the least of their worries. Really. Correct. That should have been the one that they didn't even have to really think about. Really, as far as the challenges and the complicated structure of managing 900 single-family homes. I mean, that is just, I have nightmares already thinking about that because I know that business quite well, and I had a large portfolio, not that large of single-family homes, but a fairly large portfolio. And I can promise you that managing our mobile home parks today, which is about 10 times the size of the portfolio that we had in single-family homes, is way easier. It takes less time than it did to manage 120-plus single-family homes. So that's quite interesting that was their problem child that they were trying to get rid of. So, and it also goes to show that just because, most people would probably view that seller as a sophisticated owner because he somehow amassed over the years, over probably 70 years, 1,000 properties. That's an amazing feat. That's an absolutely amazing feat. And so most people, although he was sophisticated, but not all that sophisticated, right? I mean, at some point in time, he probably just kind of got very lackadaisical and and just let things go by the wayside, which is the opportunity that was created with this apartment complex for you, because you're going to step in and run it like a professional operator. So there's a lot of opportunities out there like that. I mean, I'm not going to say that they're just overflowing like that, but there's definitely a lot of aging owners out there that just, this guy's in his 90s. I bet you in his 70s, he probably started getting a little tired. When he was 75, he was like, oh man, like now I'm true. Like my brain's still moving, but like my body is not keeping up. And some point along the way, between probably 70 and 80, he got really slow and literally just started thinking, oh, well, I'm not going to even go out there today to that property. I'll stop by tomorrow or next week, and things just go downhill. And then he just relies on Gidget to kind of run the show, and Gidget's too busy watching Dog the Bounty Hunter. and everything starts unraveling. And again, that's where there's opportunities for people like you and people like me. You get paid in this business to be a problem solver. In your home moving business, you guys literally are a problem solving business. That's exactly what you are there. And you guys make a ton of money and are very successful because you're incredible with solving problems. And the same holds true for this property that you just purchased. You literally took a problem. You know what the solution is to it. You're going to put it in place, and you're going to, literally, you're going to make a ton of money on this property because you know how to solve that problem that they couldn't solve, or that the children couldn't solve, or that Gidget couldn't solve. So that's exciting, man. I'm real excited for you. So I want to ask you now. I want to ask you now. At what stage of the turnaround process are you guys in? I mean, you closed on this. What part of 2017? Correct.
Yep. Yeah. So late May. So we're still new in the process.
Okay.
So actually, it was middle May. Yeah. So we're still new in the process. We have now been. We just everybody who was not on a lease, we put them on a month-to-month lease. So we at least had something going into the property, and we're doing stages of raising rents from just a point where if they were substantially under market, being 50% or more, we were basically telling them that we were going to take it to market and we can offer them one of the rent-ready units, just because there's no easy way to do that. If they were paying a less rent, but it was still within range, we're increasing their rent 25%. What the point here is that we want to still keep it stabilized, just because we do need to meet our returns, and we don't want to have a max exodus. And it just, we have a lot of tenants there, and just because they're paying less rent doesn't mean they're bad tenants. They were just offered less rent. So the tenants that have been good and been paying for this point, we want to make sure that we can work with them to a point where we can allow them to get to the point. So we were anticipating that we were going to go from $495 to $575 on many of the one bedrooms, and we're actually hitting a price point where the market's allowing $594. So it's actually been quite a substantial rent bump for all the apartments that we're turning down for the rent readies. So for that point is what we're doing for the rents. We are now put into our process to have a move-in fee in lieu of a deposit. We've been putting that in the process. We've put into pet fees for all the properties. We're using lease lock, where that helps us with any conditional applications. We've put that into play now for any of those, because we're in an area where it's more of a C-class area. So you have some people that maybe, got divorced, they had some struggles, and as long as it's nothing that's very looming, evictions or other points here that's on their rocket, we're going to give them a second look, and lease lock allows us to have that second look and comfortably do that. We have the boiler replacements going in 2 weeks. It's basically everything in the stage of construction. Mm-hmm. Minus we're going to do the windows in the second stage right now. So we're building the storage units. We've replaced all the marketing, redone the signs, all the tree trimming, all the landscaping outside. The windows will be on the second tier of construction. We took the office, which was basically a 3-room with a bathroom unit, and we've put a wall up in the office. So now it's its own office, and made a 2-bedroom unit out of it, that now we've added another unit to the property. The storage, we've now, of course, added the storage, and there's 2 laundry rooms on the property, and one used to be down. The laundry rooms were the only laundry rooms that are in that general area. So we've opened back up now both laundry rooms, and we have a laundry contract going into place that should be finalized within the next few weeks. So those are all the parts in process right now.
Fantastic. Is this a long-term hold for you guys? Were you able to get maybe like a small balance Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loan on this, or what kind of financing?
Yeah, we were able to do a small balance Fannie 7/6 ARM. we wanted to, just because this is our first property, we were very conservative just in the way we underwrote it. So we underwrote it out to 10 years with the expectations that we're going to hold it 5 to 7. So that's our play right here. But we wanted to just underwrite it all the way out to that point because we're newer into this, and everybody is being very aggressive in the way they're buying right now. We don't know which way interest rates going, but we're figuring over that next 5 years, we're going to have something happen. And for that, if it does happen in 5 years, okay, cool. We've already underwrote this to 10, so we're fine. Mm-hmm. So, at that point, if we have to hold it a couple more, that's great. And it was also performing day one, so we were very comfortable that, say we took on this property, we were able to get it at such a price that, say we just want to keep gidging on and just kind of just roll with it. Well, it's still was cash flowing, just nowhere as well as it could be. So that was the 2 points, and it of course allowed us to have a lot of room there and a lot of room for play, and maybe it pushed us out of a lot of deals, but we did syndicate on our deals, so we wanted to make sure that we were very particular because now we're responsible for other people's money.
Sure.
So we don't want to put them on a deal where maybe we're betting that appreciation play is going to come in, or we have to raise rents and we're going to be able to hit this number in 18 months. No, the property performs day one. But now it's going to perform much better as all these things are put in place.
Yep. No, you make a good point there about raising capital and taking other people's money to do investments. I mean, you really have to always think about the worst case scenarios. I mean, you should be doing that even if it's your own money. But I mean, being responsible for other people's money, I mean, you need to make sure that you put every steadfast stop in place for a potential failure, knowing that market turns or whatever, like be very conservative on the front end with your underwriting. Just make sure that you're just being as careful as possible. In fact, what we do, we normally put our properties that we're underwriting, we create like our own stress test for them. Like it's part of our pro forma that we model out. It's our financial modeling process. But we'll go through and we'll, depending on what kind of debt we're putting on a particular property, if it's a massive turnaround, or kind of like what our long-term strategy is with that property. But we'll go through and say it's got a 5-year balloon in place. We'll say, okay, in year 6, like our rate goes from 5% to 8%. What if it goes to 9%? What if we can't get cash out at that point in time to get some of our investor capital back? What does this look like if we have to run it out to 10 years? Like we'll put it through some very different aggressive scenarios to see what happens, to see if we can still cover our preferred returns and pay our distributions out and still feel very comfortable in the situation that we're in with that property. And if we feel that, because we know the interest rates are going to go up, right? We don't know how high they're going to go, but there was points in time back in at the 80s when rates were in 14, 15, 16%. I don't remember that time because I was really young, but I hope it never gets to that point in time again, but that would be an absolute catastrophe, especially with how some people are underwriting deals nowadays. Like they're so razor thin, and like there's no room for error whatsoever. And we make sure that we've got plenty of room for error. If we were to basically go from a 97% occupancy on a property to 90, what does that look like, right? If we lost some occupancy for whatever reason, like we're in the mobile home park business, and there's some times where regulations change, and there's grandfather status in a lot of these parks, but sometimes cities they're a little aggressive with not kind of pushing new zoning laws and ordinances on us, and there might be a chance where we might lose a lot or two of potential revenue down the road. It's never happened to us, but that's a potential. And if that does happen, what does that look like in the long term for us, and how does that affect our revenue and our cash flows? And so we always put it through kind of worst case scenario. And I think that's important for everyone to do. Just like you had mentioned, you've modeled this thing out to 10 years because we don't have a crystal ball. And if anyone that's listening, if you found that crystal ball that's working, that's going to tell us what's going to happen, please share it with Jason, because we want to see it.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. And you're so spot on. I mean, that's exactly right. You're so spot on. And we were getting beat out on a lot of deals. We're like, we just don't understand how they're able to buy this. Are they just guessing or just assuming that things are just going to continue to get better? We just don't understand. And for that's someone else's play. That's just maybe they're a lot more secure with it than we are, and that's fine. If it works for them, I hope it does, but for us it doesn't, so we have to keep to this model.
Well, Jason, now I want to go into what I call the golden nugget segment of our show, and this is where I'm going to ask if you could leave our listeners with just one last final golden nugget of advice or wisdom that may inspire and motivate them as they progress in their real estate investing career. What would that one last golden nugget be? Because you've given us a ton already, but if you had just one last good piece of advice to give, what would it be?
You can definitely do this, and you just have to know what that is. So for us, we want to get in large apartment complexes. We had a specific niche, and we knew what we wanted to do. So you want to get into real estate, be very specific. Sure, later you can broaden yourself out and do 15 different things at once, but get going with one select niche and push yourself so you are a quote unquote, you at least know more than the next person next door, and you can take your step and really push your focus onto that. And if you can focus on that one niche, I guarantee you will at least hit those steps to be able to make yourself very successful in that niche. And just to counter that, make sure to give yourself credit for what you've learned. Even if you've just gotten into this point and you're a month in, you haven't closed a deal yet, look back on where you were a month prior, about how little you did know and where you are today, and just allow yourself to have those little successes.
I've got a close friend of mine. He's a great mentor of mine, Rod Cleef. He actually has a podcast as well. I've known him for about 14 years, and he's one of my 3 people that I dial whenever I need advice or just need third party feedback or need some different perspective. And he always tells me, and I always forget, but he's like Kevin, you got to celebrate your accomplishments, even if it's just like you had mentioned there, Jason. Kind of look back 2 months and look from where you started to what you've learned. Even if you haven't done a deal yet, way more today 2 months down the road than what you did when you first got started. Celebrate those accomplishments and set goals. Whether it's a month goal or 3 month goal or 5, whatever works for you, but set goals and celebrate those small successes. Don't wait until you buy a property to celebrate that long stretch and that long path of progress that you had to go through to buy that first property. Celebrate along the way as well. And I'm one that forgets about that all the time, and he has to remind me on a regular basis. Hey, man, you guys are kicking ass. Celebrate, go out and celebrate. What you just did, or the property you just bought, or whatever, or the fact that you had X number of new students coming to your academy program or whatever it might be. And I'm like, you get caught up in the day to day, but you just can't forget to celebrate those successes, because they're so vitally important to realize where you are, because it'll also help project you into the future where you want to be. So, Jason, this has been an absolute pleasure, my friend. I really appreciate you coming on the show. And for those that want to learn more about you and your company, your website, urusiholdings.com, is that the best place to send them?
It sure is, and if they want to look a little more about what house raising is, because it can be a very interesting thing, and there's a lot of fun stuff on there. They can check us out at www.wabuildingmovers.com.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Jason, it's been an absolute pleasure. You have a great day, my friend. I'll look forward to staying in touch with you. Okay, you take care.
Thanks, Kevin.
Congratulations! Now you've got more of the best tricks of the trade in building massive amounts of passive income from real estate. For more amazing resources, visit realestateinvestingforcashflow.com, and we'll see you next Monday morning.